throughout Syria. You know, you get pictures of bloated, blackened bodies that are hanging from crosses, and they just leave them up there as a sign to all. How can anybody support that? And by the way, where is the Christian anti-war movement? Where is it? How much is enough? By our silence, we take a stand. And I'm just sick of it, because people say, oh, now you're making a political statement. And I look at them and say, am I? Am I really telling you who to vote for? Or am I just saying, I just don't want anything to do with these satanic, die-hard Muslims that we have to support because we have to rally around the flag, because we have to support our U.S. dollar, which gives us 501c3 church designation. Right?
Right.
And so I get really worked up in this topic, as you can tell.
Oh, we do too.
We absolutely relate with you, Leonard. And I would say Christians even go to the further extreme. Not only are they not silent, a lot of times they're in full support of this. You know, let's go over there. Let's intervene.
And do what? Train Al-Qaeda?
Well, we did before. We might as well, brush them up.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the arms are coming from Saudi Arabia and Qatar, because Qatar is swimming in natural gas. And a decade ago, a huge natural gas pool was discovered in the Mediterranean off the coast of Syria. That's still Syrian waters. It would be no problem for Syria to tap into that and ship it to every home in Europe, especially considering how the short distance that's involved. But Qatar doesn't like that. Now, Syria is pro-Russia, pro-China, but Qatar and Saudi Arabia are pro-US dollar. And Iran is also pro-Russian and pro-Indian, because Syria and Iran are starting to do the ultimate sin. They're starting to sell their oil for some gold. You don't do that. Now, the United States military is stretched so thin that it's just really fighting a war in Syria by proxy. It's just literally handing cash over to the Saudis, who I have an official memo where 1,200 of the worst criminal types in Saudi Arabia were told, either you fight for Al-Qaeda in Syria or we will chop off your head.
Wow.
That's right. So they're coming from Saudi Arabia, trained in jihad by the Saudis, dumped into Syria and trained by special forces like Rangers. Okay?
Huh.
In Syria with Saudi Arabian gas and Qatari rocket launchers. It's so insidious. You can put the pieces together once you see the game for what it is. And all the stuff is pretty well homemade. And it's very crude, very ineffective, but it does kill about 1,200 people. But that is nothing compared to what we've done in Iraq and so on. And this is all designed to protect the U.S. dollar, because the only thing propping up the U.S. dollar is the fact that most countries in the world, with the exception of Syria and Iran, are selling their oil in U.S. dollars. And that creates demand for U.S. dollars. And that's the only thing so far at this point in history which gives the U.S. dollar any value. Anything is only worth what somebody else is willing to pay you for it. If you have an old bicycle in the garbage dump, it might be worth $5. But if you can prove that some famous Hollywood actor rode that bicycle, suddenly it might be worth $5,000, right? Because some schmuck is willing to pay you for that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because again, when I was at my parents' house, on the news, they had back to back, they were first off they were talking about the new museum that's going in for 9/11 in New York, which is another subject in itself. But
I'll open a little shop down the street.
You know, being someone who's listened to your interviews, covering another subject was Michael Jackson's death and all of the different items now that we're selling of Michael Jackson's, like his glove and all kinds of things, and the ridiculous sums of money that people would pay for it, you know?
We all want a shot at fame. We think that by owning these objects, we somehow enhance our own lives. You know, you can't take it with you. What is the point?
I don't know.
You know what? Edward L. Bernays wrote a book about 100 years ago called Propaganda, excuse me. And he said, we are going to appeal to people's vanity. And we are going to put people in a state of arrested development so that they are easier to control. And I see 31-year-olds acting like they're 13. I just can't handle it. It's like, what, am I still back in junior high teaching, right? You know, it's so sad because we are dumbed down, and the more news we watch, the less we know.
Not just the news. I mean, the more movies we watch, the more shows we watch, the more music we put into our ears. I mean, all of it, you know. I mean, we're distracted. We're just constantly distracted, yet clinging on to the next thing that comes about.
Well, because we need constant entertainment, because we can't deal with reality anymore. Why would anyone want reality? And by the way, one of the greatest ways to induce ADHD in any child is to sit that, 6-month-year-old, 8-month-year-old, 12-month-year-old in front of the idiot box. Because especially when it comes to commercials for kids' products, a 30-second commercial will contain as many as 45 to 50 edits. That means there is something going on, an edit from one scene to another, one camera angle to another, one object on the screen to another in less than a second.
Mm-hmm.
The average adult cannot process images that fast, let alone a child. So what the child does, if he or she is increasingly exposed to television, is say to his or her own brain subconsciously, the television is what the pace of life is really all about, and reality is something that I cannot process. So because things aren't thrown at me at an increasing pace, I'm going to act out because everything is so slow. I can't wait for my next visual fix.
Oh man, and that you said it. I mean, patience. How about patience? We don't have that anymore. I mean, from our cell phones, from texting to, I mean, we don't even know how to communicate anymore because we're just, for example, you go to work, the average job, how many people are around you texting their wives and husbands, and then they have nothing to talk about when they get home.
One of the greatest things that we can teach our children from about the age of 3 and up is called lap time. Now you're going to sit in my lap for 15 minutes and you're going to talk with me. Okay? And you might even have to set up a timer in front of your kid because the kid's just going to go bonkers. But if you over time learn to slow down your child and force him or her to talk to you, you're going to build a relationship so that later on when that child becomes an adult, you're going to form lasting relationships.
And an attention span.
Oh, totally. Do you realize that it has taken me, at some points, 5 to 6 years of intermittent research to find the single item of proof that I've always been looking for that puts me on a solid foundation to speak about certain aspects of the New World Order? I've spent 5 or 6 years trying to find this or that document, and it's hard. It is like I will work on it for about 4 to 5 hours straight. And in the back of my mind, I realize, well, I'm not going to getting anything done tonight. I'll come back at it later. And then 5 or 6 years later, I finally have the document. And that is its own reward.
Perseverance.
Absolutely. So when the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, get their act together and start developing their own currency index, which I suspect they will have to announce in 2 years or less, that is the formal death knell to the US dollar, because America cannot take on Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It's impossible. But having said that, there is one thing that greatly concerns me, and that is that a war will be used as the cover for the economic collapse that is coming.
That's genius.
Oh, absolutely. I would agree with that.
Because if you're trying to control people, you can never ever get the people to put their attention on you as the source of the problem. You must have some kind of external source of the problem, and lead your captive people to offer the solution to that problem. You can never be the problem. You need to be the solution.
And as you're talking about all these countries and these currencies, I stumbled upon something recently. I think it was Eustace Mullins' protege who had said this, and I don't know what you think about Eustace Mullins. That's another topic in itself. I'm sure a lot of people distance themselves from him due to what a lot of people have said about him. But I was just kind of asking for verification here. I guess I'm getting a little bit ahead, but it's kind of on the same page here. But as far as central banks go, my understanding is that every country, with the exception of 3 countries, have a Rothschild central bank. I don't know if that's true, but what I had heard was that it was Iran, North Korea, and Cuba that did not.
That is correct.
So, and Libya, as we were speaking of before, was 4th on that list.
That is also correct. And as Gaddafi was still alive, the first thing the so-called rebels did was establish a central bank. This was apparently priority number 1 in Libya. And of course, that central bank took the tons of gold that Gaddafi was storing on behalf of the people of Libya and conveniently shipped them off to Switzerland.
Wow. I mean, I'm saying wow, but I'm not surprised. It's like one of those wows, like depressing.
That's right. Now, here is how criminal the whole situation is. And it's part of a 100-year plan. And we are seeing the thick edge of the wedge now, but it has always been a wedge for 100 years. The Federal Reserve, as we know, was established in 1913. Thanks to, bought out politicians and Nelson Ulrich, who just happened to be married into the Rockefeller family. And the Income Tax Act was also passed in conjunction with the Federal Reserve Act. Because if the currency, and only gold and silver are money, everything else is currency, okay? So when I use the word money, I'm talking about gold and silver. When I use the word currency, I'm talking about
fiat currency.
Yeah, that's right. I'm talking about digital dollars or fancy pieces of toilet paper that we all have to work for. Okay, so the income tax was phased in slowly and very insidiously. The Income Tax Act was only popular, I hate to use that word, but popular from around World War II on as an excuse to pay for the war. So The bankers always profit from war. War is the best form of economic activity if you are a banker.